So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Naomi Klein lighting up the Labour Party, using Tory talking points, and for essentially, using far right talking points as well to an extent.
I think that the Tories know they're going to lose, and they seem to be practically throwing the election. They've basically written it off, and it seems like Labour is trying not to make any sudden movements and to send lots of reassuring messages that very little really is going to change. And I think if we look at the European elections...
Are you disappointed by that?
I am. I'm not just disappointed. I'm worried, because if we look at what just happened in Europe, if we look at what Schulz is doing, I'm seeing Labour poised to make the same mistakes, which absolutely I think will win an election, but will set the table for a far-right comeback.
And this is something I've been saying for a while. If you don't improve living standards by a really good amount here, you let the far right come in, and they're going to push the argument of this is all down to immigrants. They're already doing that with the Labour Party, to an extent buying into it by talking about cutting that immigration. This is the big danger here, because if you allow the discourse of blaming immigrants for things, especially when, like I've said before, Labour pushed the line of immigrants taking jobs from British people, it's dangerous, because you blame a minority of people when it wasn't their fault that things happen. If people didn't migrate here, the NHS would be in a far worse state. Name an industry, it'd be in a far worse state. And that's one of the things where I genuinely don't understand why Labour are buying into this rhetoric. Win the election, sure. Smoke the pack. Poison the well. That's all that's going to happen here. All that's going to happen. And you're enabling the far right because you're using their talking points. And she's 100% correct here.
That's what I'm worried about. I think the message that we're seeing from Europe is there really need to be policies that meet people's most urgent needs. And this idea of what we're hearing from your leader about these fiscal rules and basically sounding like Margaret Thatcher on running a government like a household, which is ridiculous, is going to set the table for a far-right comeback.
And, you buy into the rhetoric of David Cameron, where David Cameron talked about the economy kind of as a household. Thatcher, when she spoke about that. So when you start borrowing large sums of money for investment to actually grow the economy, which Labour should do, and if they do go down that path, they're going to look irresponsible and stupid, because you've already talked about how important, household budgeting and all this kind of nonsense is, when in reality we need to borrow money to invest in the country. That's the only way to get the economy moving. Is some more here?
In France, because in France compared to the UK, the parliamentary system in the UK, the party with the largest MP selects who leads as a prime minister, whilst in France, the party of the largest party do not get to select the president, if that makes sense.
Yes.
The president then appoints the prime minister, you see. So when Macron's party, La France en Marche, didn't get the majority of seats in the parliament, he needed to form coalitions, most especially for his immigration bill. Guess who Macron coalesced with?
Yeah.
He went along with the Rassemblement National, the far-right party.
So he's already bent, hasn't he? He's already bent a bit, and that's crucial, I think, to understanding the decision to call the election, because he can't bend any further, would be his calculation.
That's exactly it. So to the young French citizen in the banlieues, they look at that and say, they're normal politicians then.
Jesus Christ, that's a giant mug.
These racists are normal politicians.
Oh, gosh, yes.
And they're being allowed into government. That's the other thing. You've allowed them into government. You've normalised the far right when you work with them.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
If the president's willing to talk to them in...
They cease to be fringe extremists. They cease to be fringe extremists, even if they haven't changed at all.
Exactly. I say this as a young black French citizen who's got black French friends still in France, who now tell me that they might vote far right because, mum and dad were wrong about them. Mum and dad got punched in the streets in the 70s. But these guys don't sound like people that are going to beat us up. Look at him. He's 27. He looks like our friends at football.
This is terrifying that people are seeing kind of the far right get normalised like this, because these are the people that will stab you in the back. They will look to deport you. They will demonise you when they're in power. It's just because they wear nicer suits now and they use more dog whistle racism, and they might say you're one of the good ones. No person from a minority background should fall for this nonsense. Honestly, it's very dangerous, and you're not voting in your best interest. I went through that with Brexit, where I've known people from an Asian background that vote for Brexit. I had to explain to them that, look, you never side with these people, because when they get into power, they'll stab you in the back as well. They hate all minorities. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
I do. Yes.
They've done the work. They've done.
Well, this is the difference between, I guess, Nigel Farage and Nick Griffin, isn't it? That it just becomes a more palatable version of the same sort of rhetoric.
And what they do is they try and find the minorities that they can target the easiest and start from there. That's why Farage went after Romanians. He said, I wouldn't want to live next door to a Romanian. That was his rhetoric, and that's the way he kind of tried to normalise it to people, by saying they're criminals and things like that. And then he would have moved on to another minority group and another minority group. He would have found the next one that people didn't like or weren't sure of and gone from there. That's how it starts. And ultimately, Nigel Farage won that argument. And there's some more from Naomi Klein.
A lot of what I've been writing about and researching is how when you have a sort of weak centrist political power base that is not meeting people's urgent economic and social needs, the right becomes a lot more attractive, and especially when you have center left and center right parties that are adopting a lot of the policies of the far right, and then the distinctions get a lot blurrier, and it's harder to scare people and say, well, this is will be the end of the world if France votes for Le Pen, and I do think it is incredibly alarming.
What do you think it is about the messaging of the far right? You say that the centrist parties don't meet the needs of the people. What is it that they're sort of selling to people that makes them feel that their needs might be met if they vote this way?
Well, I think what they're capturing is a genuine feeling of brokenness, that the system is broken, that it's failing. They're also capturing a sense that the system is rigged against you, which is actually true. I mean, we have an economic system that is serving elites, and the cost of living, as we know, is soaring. A lot of things really are breaking, including our planetary systems. So when you have center-right and center-left parties sort of sending this message of, no, things are basically okay, maybe we'll do a little bit of technocratic tweak.
With Labour, they're not saying things are okay, but they're not saying they're going to change a ton. That's the thing, and so you're going to get 5 years of potentially more stagnation. Might be better than, say, the Cameron era based on the policies we're looking at. But again, that's not going to be enough for people. And once the Tory party have failed people, the Labour party have failed people, who's left? And the person who gets the most media attention outside of the Labour party and the Tory party is the Reform party. Because the media are happy to put them on. Whether I don't know why that is. Is it because they get views or something? I'm not sure. But they are more than happy to put them on. And again, in terms of the policies they offer, I mentioned before, the Reform Party are saying they're going to raise the tax threshold to £20,000, and that will take a lot of people out of paying tax. So certain people, they might not agree with Tyson or the Reform's policies on immigration or the way they go after minority groups and things like that, but they might agree with that policy there that would actually improve their life. And whether Reform will do it or not, that's another thing. But if people believe they will vote for that policy, for that party, because at the end of the day, when it comes to stomping on minority groups, people I think would happily do that in England if it meant that they would pay less in tax, etc., or if they thought their life would improve in some material way. Even if they didn't think their life would improve that much in a material way. We saw that with Brexit.
Speaking, that doesn't resonate with people's lived experience of unraveling, of genuine difficulty. So one of the things that I write about is how they get the facts wrong, but the feelings right. And the feeling that I think that they're tapping into is a deep unfairness.
What I would say is, I think in terms of getting the facts wrong, what they'll do is they'll agree with you to an extent. I saw that watching it's called the Breaking Point show now, but it was called something else before, The Hill. It was Saga and Crystal Ball, where they would sometimes agree with each other, but they would offer different solutions. And that's the thing there. When they agree with you partway, they agree there's a cost of living crisis. They agree you're paying too much in tax. They agree you can't get a house. You can't get an appointment. But instead of saying we need to improve social services, what they do is they blame immigrants. So they're agreeing with you partway, but they offer you a different solution. And that's where the danger comes in. I've spoken about it before. People ask loads of comments about why, I kept saying the word danger and whatever. I've literally explained it. Like, the far-right parties, they don't like minorities, for a start. And so we've seen that in Europe when these kind of far-right parties get in power. who do you think they're going to attack? They're going to attack minorities, and it's in my best interest not to have them in power, because I ain't looking to get attacked on the street.
Of, okay, maybe people are scheming in rooms and that you're not in, and they spin it into conspiracy theories, and they also scapegoat very well, but it's the feeling that they're getting right, that centrist parties are really...
And what scares me is centrist parties are more likely to do collaborations with the far right than they are with the left. They will always, there's a whole meme about it, it's like, centrist party saying we want to compromise, and then the left say compromise with us, and then they're like, no, I meant the far right law. That's how it goes. And there's one more here from Klein I want to discuss.
Of a scandal about Rishi Sunak's actions around D-Day, and I understand why people are offended. I understand the pain that this is evoked, but to me, the lessons of the Second World War, the lessons of D-Day, the way to honor the many, many victims is to look at history and look at the conditions under which the far right rises. And I think it's when the right makes an alliance of convenience with the far right, that is when fascism rises.
All right. Now that is true. That is true. When that alliance happens, you go down a much, much darker path. You normalise them, and that's something we saw in that LBC call with O'Brien and that caller. You normalise them, and that's where things get even worse. You bring them into the mainstream. You bring their talking points there, and you find it harder and harder to argue with them because they're cutting through. Especially when they put out policies that would materially improve people's lives, like raising the tax threshold to 20k. That's something that would resonate with people. Of course, they'd have to go down the classic, how are you going to pay for it and all that stuff, which they're going to have to figure out for themselves. But this is what I mean here. Right-wing populism is different to kind of your average kind of right-wing politicians, because, like I keep saying, they will agree with you up to a point, but they will offer you different solutions. It's very nervy. We're seeing in Europe the rise of the AfD, the rise of the far right in France. Like people in England should not be complacent. Never be complacent about the threat that the far right poses to you, because it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't take long for it to take hold. All you need are mostly really economic problems, and that's where it normally starts from. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.